And hello, everyone. This is Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And Giant fans, that was a gut punch. There's no way around it. And on this morning, where for the Giants, the NFL season isn't even a week old, it feels like the season's over. And I completely get why. There is so much to get into in this game. Joe Judge, Saquon Barkley, the defense. But I'm going to start off on the biggest topic of this season, which is Daniel Jones, and talk about the one positive. This was, to me, one of his best games that I've ever seen him play. Didn't turn the football over, had some explosive plays, and really, you walked out of the game feeling like the team let him down, as opposed to the opposite, where it usually feels like Daniel Jones let the team down. This was the opposite. And I know it's not a good look when now Daniel Jones is 0-6 in primetime games. But let's be honest, this was probably one of his best games. And really, when you look at the Giants, the thing that really kills you as a fan today isn't that they lost, it's how this team had chance after chance after chance and just seemingly blew it. You look at the Daniel Jones touchdown run that was called back for a hold that really the wide receiver didn't need to make. Daniel Jones had plenty of running room. If he just gets his body in front, it's a touchdown. That was taken off the board. Then later, Daniel Jones with one of his best throws to the end zone. No one around. And a brutal drop in the end zone. Just absolutely brutal. And they made a great statement on the telecast, which is you may never get more open in the NFL in your career. There are receivers that never get that open. And the Giants couldn't take advantage. And then Washington decides, despite having a lead, despite having Antonio Gibson running over 5 yards a carry per clip, decides to pull a Pete Carroll playbook out of the water and decide, hey, we're going to throw it. And the Giants get an interception. And instead of today talking about how the Washington football team had one of the most egregious calls we've ever seen and basically gave the game to the Giants. Like, we forget this. The Giants had the game. All the Giants have to do is get a first down. But that series, to me, says everything you need to know about how this team and how, more importantly, this coaching staff views their starting quarterback. Because they were highly conservative. They basically said without saying, we don't trust Daniel Jones. They didn't put the ball in the hands of their quarterback and say, hey, go make a play, get us this first down, and get this game over with. Instead, they played hyper-conservative, 3 plays, give Washington the ball back with 2 minutes and a timeout, kick the field goal. And this is the thing that really bothered me. If this was a situation where if a field goal makes it a touchdown lead, then it's a little bit different because then you're forcing Washington to go the length of the field to score a touchdown. But when you look at it, and it's basically just going to give you the lead, and a field goal wins the game, not even tie it, wins the game. It's like, they get the ball pretty much at the 25. They only realistically have to go 40, 45 yards in 2 minutes. And that's exactly what they did. And that last series has to be incredibly troubling because when we came into the season for the Giants, there was 2 things that fans felt pretty confident about. That was their head coach and their defensive coordinator and this defense. And we came out of the Sunday game against Denver going, okay, it was the first game, nothing to really worry about. But I was sounding the alarms. I'm saying, look, Teddy Bridgewater is not a great quarterback. He's a solid quarterback. And look, Heineke could be something special. We've only seen him in a couple games. There's a lot of things he does very well. But he's a backup quarterback. And Washington doesn't believe in him that much, because if they really believed in him, he would have been the starting quarterback this year and they wouldn't have gone out and got Ryan Fitzpatrick. So the Giants now have lost to a backup quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. And now we'll face Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston, who looks reborn, and Dak Prescott in the next 3 games. That is alarming. This defense was supposed to be the big difference maker of the team. This defense was supposed to be elite. This is supposed to be one of the better units in the NFL. And they have looked nothing like they did last year. And that has to be terrifying as a Giant fan. Because if I was to tell you before this game, hey, I got good news, the Giants are going to score 29 points of offense, I guarantee you most of you would have signed up and said, oh, we're winning this game. 29 points, we're winning this football game. And then the last drive. See, when a lot of people last year were commending Joe Judge and saying, Joe Judge is being a great coach, he's changed the culture. And I get it, there was a very low bar with the Giants. But when I came out of last year, I was going, okay, I like some of the things Judge is doing, but he doesn't wow me schematically. He seems to be comfortable just letting the coordinators run the show instead of stepping in when he needs to. And you look at the Joe Judge, like, what was this team supposed to be? It wasn't necessarily that they were going to be out X and O teams, but they were going to be disciplined. They were going to be smart. They weren't going to make dumb mistakes. And all you've seen through 2 games this year is some of the most head-scratching mistakes you've ever seen. Just think about the last possession in the football game. Not even the 58 minutes before, and there was a lot in there, but just think about that last sequence where the Giants defense gets an offsides after a timeout. Then they have 13 men on the field so egregiously, and it takes them so long to get off the field, they have to burn a timeout that they can't potentially use to ice the kicker. Then Washington, up for the field goal, kicks it wide right, game over. Wait a minute. Dexter Lawrence jumping in the neutral zone. Washington gets another chance, and we all know what happened then. See, for Joe Judge, look, Dave Gettleman deserves a lot of blame for this roster construction, for this offensive line, and I get it. Dave Gettleman, to me, is the first one on the hot seat. I completely understand that, but could we also mention Joe Judge? I understand that last year there was this mirage because this division was so inept last year. And the one hope Giants fans have is this is probably going to be an inept division this year. You got 17 games. Maybe the Giants find themselves and maybe they're able to turn it around. But you just get the feeling right now that they are a mess. And you just look, they just look fundamentally broken. They're making stupid, silly mistakes that you go, what are you doing? Like jumping off sides, not keeping count of how many people are on the field. It's just unbelievable. And right now you're looking at Patrick Graham going, we gave you that contract extension? And I do think Patrick Graham's probably sitting wherever he is today going, man, you know, I was a hot coaching candidate this offseason. Maybe should have taken that head coaching job if I got offered one, because right now that Giant defense, that vaunted Giant defense, has given up 57 points in 2 games to Taylor Heineke and Teddy Bridgewater. And like I said, now they face Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston, who threw 5 touchdowns in week 1, and Dak Prescott in the next 5 games. That has to be terrifying. And Gettleman deserves to have a hot seat. And I do think the Giants, by Thanksgiving, will have a decision on Daniel Jones. I do think he's going to make it tough, though, because if he's going to have a couple games like that last night where you go, okay, we see the athleticism, we see the arm, we see the talent. But the problem with Daniel Jones is, are you going to get the one you got last night, or are you going to get one that turns the ball over 3 times in a football game? That's the big mystery. And in the NFL, you're looking for consistency. And right now with Jones, you're not sure what you're getting game in and game out. I mean, think about it. If we are praising a quarterback's performance for just not turning over the football, I mean, that has to be concerning, especially for a guy that's had this many starts. But you just look, this team is just in complete disarray. I mean, you just watch that game. Saquon Barkley breaks off the big run, then only has 42 other rushing yards the rest of the night. I don't put a lot on Saquon. I just think you really have to see him get healthy. I think that they've pushed him a little too quickly to get back into this lineup. And he's coming back from a major injury. So people that are getting on Saquon, give it a little bit more time. If he's still looking like this in a couple weeks, then you can get on him. But for now, I don't think it's fair. But you have to get on this coaching staff because, to me, I saw a couple of red flags about Joe Judge. And I understand, like I just said, Gettleman should be on the hot seat. But Joe Judge shouldn't be comfortable on his seat either. Because the Giants are just a mess right now under him. And it's not just that they're playing terrible, but just look at what's happened. And we're not even to week 3. You have 4 veterans that retired in training camp because of the practices. You have their first round rookie after 2 games. The one that they made such a big deal about, Kadarius Toney from Florida, that they got this great weapon that they're going to use in the offense, is complaining about his usage. And if I was him, I get it. I was one of the top receivers taken in the NFL draft. And I'm barely getting used. And I also see across town that the New York Jets drafted Elijah Moore in the 2nd round, and he basically played pretty much every offensive snap in week 1. And I get the Jets are a bad team, but if you're Tony, you're going, well, wait a minute. Devontae Smith's getting plenty of time. Jalen Waddle's getting all this playing time. All these receivers that I'm in that group with played a ton week 1, will probably play a lot week 2, and I'm just sitting here on the sideline watching my team lose 2 games, and I'm not even getting in the game. And then you have Kenny Golladay. $72 million, 7 catches, 102 yards, no touchdowns to the first 2 games, and already having a huge blowout on the sideline last night after what appeared to be him not getting the football. This has to be concerning because this team, it just feels like there is a disconnect right now. And one of the things you felt with Joe Judge last year is like this was a team. They were all on the same page. They were all together. But when you started seeing these rumblings out of training camps about the players not liking the practice, about the players running the punishment laps, about the players that were retiring, the veterans that the practices were too hard. And I understand that people are going to be like, oh, they're football players. They should suck it up. But the thing is, the coaching style that Joe Judge uses, it works great when you're winning. But when you're losing and when you are getting out-coached in 2 games, when you are getting outgunned, and when you are in games where on paper you should be in these games, and you look at that game on paper last night, they had a backup quarterback in for Washington. That is a game you should win. And Daniel Jones is 4-0 coming into that game against Washington. He's a Washington football team killer. Everything was aligned, and you just look at all the little mistakes that just added up. And if you're a player on that Giants sideline, you're going, wait a minute. We're getting our butts kicked at practice. We're getting absolutely worn out. We're doing all these punishment laps. And our coaching staff looks absolutely inept. And I get it. It's on the coaching. It's on the players. And for the fans, they're done with the moral victories. That was last year. Last year was the growing phase. And when you saw this team be aggressive in the offseason, when you saw this team go out and spend big money in free agencies to get the final pieces, you were thinking to yourself, okay, we'll probably be a playoff contender in this division. We understand this is a good division and it's winning ugly, but there's a good shot for this Giant team to make the postseason. And you just look at what the first two games have been. It has been your worst nightmare. And you probably got one of the best games Daniel Jones might play this entire year. But when you came into this season, you felt that this team was going to be disciplined and that this team was going to have a great defense that could carry them. And through two games, you have seen absolutely none of that. This defense has no pass rush. Heineke had all the time in the world, was only sacked once last night. They need to get pressure on quarterbacks. And I get it as Giant fans. There is still hope in this season because there's an extra game. This is a bad division. You're hoping this team can figure it out. You're hoping Saquon gets healthier. But I know we've talked about Daniel Jones' development, and that is going to be the biggest storyline this year. But after these first two games, you really have to look at this coaching staff because the warning signs to me were in training camp when you had players that retired. I'm not sure this team is buying into this coaching staff. And we've seen teams, what happens when things go south and they don't believe in the coaching staff and they don't want to fight for that coaching staff. I mean, we've seen bad teams in the last couple of years in the NFL. Like, they love their coach. They'll still be fighting in week and out. But we've also seen teams that when they don't believe in the coach, they'll take a couple plays off. They don't play their heart out. And to me, that will be the big determination. Because even last year, this team was below 500, but they were in a race. So they had something to play for in the second half of the season. If this team gets off to a slow start in the next 3 weeks, like I said, you're facing quarterbacks that can dice up this defense. That is why this game was so important. I said in the last episode, this was a must-win game just for the fact of how tough the schedule is going to get. For me, we talk about Gettleman, we talk about Daniel Jones, and how important this season is for them, and rightfully so. But after this game, now you have to add the coaching staff to that list. Because if this continues to go south and you're already starting to see the cracks, Kenny Golladay yelling, their first-round rookie who feels like he's not getting playing time and feels he has enough of a case to already be speaking out after 2 games. If this continues to go south and this coaching staff doesn't get this team to buy in, it can get really ugly really fast. That's going to do it for this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our New York Giants content this year with reactions after every game. And hey, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you put a comment below like what you would like me to talk about, because with the YouTube algorithm, it only will help other Giant fans see our content. Once again, thank you so much. Until next time, this is Rich Sports Talk.